What was the biggest challenge for you? Was it that you kept speaking out, or you didn't feel like you could share your voice because people were making fun of you, or?
I mean, mostly it was that, you know how kids are, that if you're not part of the in-group, you're part of the out-group. Or there is no out-group.
Even if this religious, loving,
does not matter. Does not matter.
Community experience.
People are still people. Religion is based on the assumption that people are still people, and religion proves it out, man. There are a lot of religious people who treat each other viciously, and this is particularly true when you're talking about teenagers who are just by and large
trying to fit in and figure
beings.
out life. Yeah,
I mean, you're the worst version of you. Aside from when you're 2, which I know because I have a son who's 2.
Right.
Aside from when you're 2, and you're completely a selfish person.
Yeah.
But until you hit adulthood and actually experience responsibility, when you're like 14 or 15, and mom and dad are taking care of all your bills, and you can and
your laundry and your food and your bed.
Giving you, and when you're going to an upper class Jewish school, they're giving you a car. Right, I mean, like it's like that. That
you didn't have to pay for it. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Like that does not tend to breed particularly great behavior. And it does breed a certain group mentality also. I mean, there's a herd mentality among kids, obviously, and among people generally, but it is very strong among teenagers.
So you spent 2 years in high school then, essentially, right?
Three years. So yeah, 10th, 11th, 12th, yeah.
Gotcha. Did you feel like you were the outsider the whole time? And what were people saying or doing to you?
Oh yeah, I mean, it was I mean, I was the outsider the whole time for sure. I mean, I would be physically accosted. There was one situation where I was on. There was kind of a weekend getaway, and there was one situation where guys legitimately like held me down in a bed and hit me with belts.
No way.
There was a situation where, and then that concluded with them, like somebody brought a long pair of handcuffs. They dragged the bed frame outside the cabin and then handcuffed me to the bed frame in front of like the entire school. So it was good times.
The guys and the girls?
Well, the girls weren't there, so this is just guys. But it was
still so horrible. But could you imagine if it was the guys and girls?
Oh, you know, if girls been there, it would be even worse. But I was having my own level of unsuccess with the girls as well. So
right. So they were hitting you with belts, pinning you down and hitting you with belts, and then they handcuffed you to a bed outside.
Yeah, that was the next morning. Yeah, and because and so you know, high school was not a lot of fun for me.
Was that your first year, sophomore year?
That would have been. Yeah, I think it was either sophomore or junior year.
Wow.
I can't remember.
Did it get better? Did it get worse? Did you?
It got better than that. I mean, it wasn't like that every single day. That was definitely the low point. But it was, you know, it was unpleasant. A lot of again, I don't think most of the kids there were like that.
It's tough because you get in this group mentality when it's like everyone's rallying against a cause, right?
Right, and and in school the cause is always somebody. It's always some kid.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, you know, I was that for a while, and I was excited to get out of high school. I mean, I enjoyed like the learning aspect of it, but I was very excited to leave. And when I got to college, I was so happy, especially because when I was in college, I lived at home, so that meant I wasn't like with the other students full time. I was spending a lot of time commuting. But I would go to class, and I'd learn stuff, and then I'd leave, and then I'd go write essays and read, and then I'd go back to school, and it was great. Like, it was just great. And I got along with people in college, because nobody in college cares how old you are, really.
Yeah, they just care that you're smart or you're kind or whatever in class.
Exactly. No, I loved college. I thought college was great, and then when I went to law school, I loved law school, too. So high school was the worst of it, for sure. Wow. But the question was, you know, again, it was just the mentality was, what do you do about it? And
how did you overcome it during high school?
I just put my head down and pushed. I mean, it was. I never shut up. I mean, I never. It was not like I just kind of receded into silence or being sullen or anything. It was like, okay, well, you know, this is how life is going to be. Okay, you take a few punches and you keep moving. Right. And you know that had been inculcated a little bit younger, because when I went to middle school, even I used to wear a yarmulke to middle school, and it was a public middle school, so there was some issues there as well. So
were you the only one wearing a yarmulke?
Oh yeah,
really?
I mean, it was Walter Reed Middle School, not a lot of Orthodox Jews going there. So it was. So I was kind of a social outcast there too, and so again, you sort of learn to grow a thick skin, and you either just basically say to these people, "Go F off," you know, or you knuckle under to it.
Did you have any close friends? Middle school or high school where you could confide in or talk to?
No.
Zero, not one kid?
No.
Not one kid your age that you could be like, hey, let's talk at lunch or let's
No, I mean, I had people I was acquainted with, but no, I wouldn't say I had any strong, close friends.
So did you get invited to like birthday parties at kids at school? Did you go hang out?
Occasionally, but not really. I mean, that wasn't...
Church kids, like anything?
So, no. I mean, I honestly, I spent most of my childhood talking to adults. I mean, that was really kind of like most of the people I was having conversations with were 45. So that meant, number one, the level of conversation was better, but No, I've never been a friends person. I'm a very family-oriented person. So I spend almost all of my best friend is my business partner. But aside from that, all of the people that I'm closest to are my parents, who live a mile and a half away from me, my wife, who I spend 95% of all waking free time with, and my two kids, who I spend an enormous amount of time with. And I think I do think people are either built one way or the other. I think there are people who are kind of more friends people and social, and they like to be out with friends, and they want to spend time with friends. Like I'm the kind of jerk who'd go to a party at Harvard Law, and we'd go to a party, and I would bring a book with me. Because if people were boring, I was not going to waste the 2 hours just sitting there.
It's a good time to read right now.
Yeah, exactly. I got in a lot of good reading at these parties. So. Wow. So if
I ever call you up and say, "Hey, do you want to hang out?" I'm going to get the X right away.
I mean, unless my wife and kids are out of town, yeah, basically. I mean, that is the reality.
Sure.
I mean, because for me, every interaction has to be weighed against the opportunity loss, right? It's like
your mom. It's very practical.
Exactly. Like there's a certain economic cost foregone.
Yeah.
In every conversation, in every bit of time that you spend.
Sure.
And so I turn down dinner invites. Like it's very difficult to get me to go out to dinner, even with people who are prominent, because I don't want to. Like you have to make the case as to why I should be spending the time with you, as opposed to spending the time with my two kids, who I like a lot better than you. Right. And that's I mean my kids are great. My wife is great. I picked them. They're fantastic. And so
wow. Do you feel like you kind of got robbed from your childhood then?
In a sense, I suppose. I mean, high school wasn't fun. So if childhood is supposed to be kind of like fun, then yeah, but it was an alternative use of time for me. Right?
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time reading and a lot of time writing and a lot of time involving myself in stuff I wanted to be involved with. So I considered my childhood pretty happy without, it just was not social.
You had a focus. So, you had goals early on because you're.
Yeah, I mean, I was a near professional musician. I studied with one of the top 10 teachers in the world at the time.
In violin.
And
piano too, right?
Not piano. My dad's a professional pianist, so we'd play Brahms together and like that. So.
Were you Suzuki trained?
Yeah, originally. Yeah. And then I moved on to a teacher named Abram Stern, who was a Russian, top level Russian teacher who lived out here in West LA. And then I'd fill it with that. I would fill it with, again, a lot of reading and a lot of conversations. It was a good time to pick up on my movie watching, so I've seen every Oscar-nominated film since 1933.
Wow.
So that's how you create the cultural knowledge base for doing a show. It all pays off in the end.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, in the sense that I wasn't getting invited to the cool kid parties,
right.
then yeah, that was disappointing and upsetting. And I remember it was much more disappointing at the time than it is now.
Yeah.
And I will say that it is amusing. Just human beings are amusing, and I'm sure you know this. That I'm sure you've experienced the same thing. Is that people treat you very differently when you are less successful and when you are more successful.
And now they're all coming back and be like, "Oh man, you remember us in high school?" Yeah, it happens to me.
Yeah, I do remember you in high school.
Yeah. Delete. Yeah. What was your most proud moment growing up?
Well, I mean, the best moment growing up was when I caught a foul ball at a Dodger game. But my most proud moment growing up, I don't know. You'd have to say before college and after college.
Okay, before college.
So I mean, before college, I would say that I still think my most proud moments are doing nice things for people. So like. I try to do nice things for people, not talk about them. So that means that I can't talk about them. But,
sure.
But as far as, I was proud that when I was in high school, I was 14 and I won a 10-minute play contest from Princeton, like that kind of stuff.
A 10-minute play contest?
Yeah, fiction, like a fiction play, like
a
short play.
Oh wow, that's cool.
So that was kind of fun.
Cool.
Yeah, that kind of stuff was neat.
Yeah.
There's the occasional school fight that you win, right? Those are always proud moments. Right? As a dude, those are always proud moments. There's always some point where
I fought back.
Exactly. Or there's a sports moment where you finally make one move playing basketball. When I was in junior high, for some reason, I just got incredibly hot and hit 15 shots in a row, and the coach was right there, and he's like, "Why don't you try out for the basketball team?" And I'm like, "I suck at basketball."
I guess you got lucky. Yeah.
Because I'm terrible.
Yeah.
I mean, there's that kind of stuff, and then post-college, obviously, my proudest moments are getting married, having my kids. Taking care of my family, things where I've stepped in to help people. And that's all the stuff that I actually can. And then, listen, I'm very proud of the stuff that I do on a daily basis where I feel like I'm actually reaching. I get a lot of letters from folks saying that because they've listened to the show, that it's changed their life in some material way and it's made them think about something differently. And that's great to hear, especially because my show is so political.
Yeah.
Right? It's political entertainment. So if I get a letter from somebody saying that I changed their life, like I got one the other day from a guy who said that his girlfriend had gotten pregnant and he wasn't thinking about marrying her and she was thinking about having an abortion. And he listened to the show, and I'm very pro-life. And so he had listened to the show and he went to her and said, listen, I think that we ought to have the baby, and I think that and I'm also obviously very pro-marriage, and I said, you should, and he said, I think we ought to have the baby, and I think we ought to get married. And they got married, and they had the baby, and they couldn't afford it, and it didn't matter, and he said, we're happier now than we've ever been in our lives.
Wow.
I've gotten letters from people who say that they were drug abusers, and they listened to the show, and then because the constant message is, kind of get up off your ass, and
take care of yourself.
That doesn't mean that we won't help you out if you need it, right? Like, I give a lot of charity, people should give a lot of charity, but the first step has to be you, right? I mean, the first step in the morning has to be you getting out of the bed. And so I get a lot of letters from people who've been addicts who have gone to 12-step programs because they feel the necessity to change their lives in material ways. I mean, that's the stuff I'm really proud of. All the other stuff is just ancillary, I think.
Yeah. It's funny, I feel in some ways very similar to you because I was picked on a lot growing up, even though it doesn't look like it because I'm like this bigger guy or whatever.
I'm gonna say how, yeah.
It's funny because I was the complete opposite of you. You were like the smartest kid in the class, I was the dumbest kid in the class. So I was in the bottom 4 every year through high school and middle school. I had tutors my whole life. I was in special needs. I had a 2nd grade reading level in 8th grade.
Wow.
So I was the kid that the teacher would call in front of the class to speak and read, and I couldn't read the first lines, and I would just stutter and mumble. So I was just made fun of constantly for being the most ignorant kid. And I used that kind of frustration and anger of being picked on to be like, I'm gonna be the best athlete I can be to prove everyone wrong and show you guys, right? And so when I got into high school, I was one of the better athletes as a freshman. I was kind of like the opposite of you, right? You were like the smartest,
right.
And I was like the better athlete. So I was on varsity my freshman year of every sport. And so everyone was 17, 18, I was 14. So I was the one they picked on. I was the one they picked on, right? And so every year I was just like the younger one that they picked on and kind of razzed and hazed or whatever. Until I was a senior, then all of a sudden I was like, oh, all the people I was hanging out with are gone. And I remember having a moment going into my senior year. I was like, all my friends and the ones who picked on me the whole time are gone. I can either be like them to lower classmen, but I was like, that feels horrible to me. I don't want to just repeat what they did. So instead I said, I'm going to focus on trying to connect with everyone, like the geeks, the science people, I was in choir, I was in musical plays, I did tap dancing, I did everything, and I was just like, I'm going to try to connect with all humans and learn about people and not repeat what happened to me my whole childhood. And I think hearing you say your most proud moments are when you give and when you're kind to people and when you're in charity, when you're
it violates my brand, but yeah, that's
I think it's really inspiring to hear because same thing for me. It's I don't feel good when I'm just constantly making money is fun and having these accomplishments are nice, but it's the times that I'm in the most flow and in the most love and fulfillment is when I'm in service to someone else.
Yeah.
Or in service to humanity, which is what my mission is.
And that's also the big thing, I think, is that learning from your own mistakes and mistakes other people have made dealing with you, do you learn from that and you decide to react against that in a way that's better? Or do you just react to it and lash out because of it and decide that because somebody else did something bad, you also get to do something bad? And I think that the mark, as I get older, I think that the mark of a good person, or at least a person who's trying, is a person who wakes up in the middle of the night worried about the mistake they made the previous day. And how do you fix that?
Wow.
And the mark of a person who's going to have problems is a person who wakes up in the middle of the night angry at what somebody else did to them.
Yeah.
Because there are certainly cases where somebody's really victimized you in a serious way, and that's something we should all worry about and try and do something about. But most problems are not going to be overcome by being angry at stuff that's happened to you in the past, unfortunately.
Reacting in a negative way. Now I'm curious, if you had this normal childhood, let's say, right? You didn't skip grades, kids were nice to you, they invited you to birthday parties, they celebrated you as opposed to put you down and whipping you with belts and crazy stuff. Do you think you would be as driven as a human being that you are today and as focused on, building everything you're building and having all these debates?
I doubt it. I mean, really, because one of the things that you learn when you get beat on a lot is that you either have to care what people think or you really don't care what people think. And I think that it's something that doesn't help you when you're in high school not to care what people think, because caring what people think is what makes you popular in high school, and trying to cater to that crowd.
And going into the herd as opposed to being like, screw you guys.
Right, exactly. But because I was sort of out of the herd from the time that I was young, it was like, okay, well, I don't care. And you say that enough to at the beginning, you do care, obviously, but at a certain point, right? You're like, and then at a certain point, you're like, you know what? But I actually don't. Like, my life is not materially worse because I'm not dealing with these people, and having followed them would have been dumb. Hanging out with would I want to? And so I feel that same way about politics and principles. Like, I'm not somebody who has typically tended to move with the herd, and that's true on specific issues, and it's true, insofar as things like elections, right? In 2016, I took the most unpopular position you could take. I didn't vote for either major candidate. I did that as
you announced it, too.
I said that out loud. I said it repeatedly. I was extraordinarily critical of President Trump's character and personality. I still am. And it's not my job to please people. I mean, if people are pleased with me, then great. But it's not my job to please people. It's my job to say things that I think are true. And if I start sacrificing what I think is true in favor of pleasing people, then I'm not doing my job. I'm not being true. I'm not being honest, and people can sense that. I mean,
you become a politician.
Right, exactly. Authenticity is about saying a bunch of unpopular stuff, which is why politicians are generally inauthentic, because their job is to say stuff that people want to hear, or you don't win.
Yeah.
Right. But
I guess Trump proved us wrong by saying a lot of things that people didn't want to hear. But
yeah, I mean, I think that's right. But I think that we'll find out whether that's a lasting trend. I mean, not to get into 2016 election analysis, but I would say that President Trump won. I would say Hillary Clinton lost the election much more than President Trump won it.
Yeah.
So I think that it is true that in politics there is this weird thing where people want to hear what they want to hear, but they also hate inauthenticity. And so
his authenticity.
His authenticity trumped her inauthenticity. Right? Obama was an authentic politician. He tended to believe all the things that he was saying. It didn't feel like he was pandering as much, even though I think that he was pandering. I think he was, but he was. Obama is who Obama is. I'm not even sure that Hillary Clinton knows who Hillary Clinton is, and I think it was a problem for her in 2016. Trump is exactly who he is, for better and for worse, right? I mean, for all of the things good about him and all the things bad about him, that dude is authentically what Donald Trump is. And people sense that, and so when they had the choice between, not even choosing between Hillary and Trump, because I don't think that's how most people came down to it. I don't think most people were like, should I choose one or should I choose the other? I think it was people who were like, should I go to the polls today or not?
Right.
And for people who thought Hillary was inauthentic, they're like, she's probably going to win anyway. Do I really want to waste my time today? Do I really owe that to her? And for people who thought Trump was authentic, like, yeah, I'm right, I'm going to the polls today. That dude's authentic. He's saying what I think. Right? And that was sort of the feel in 2016.
Yeah. Wow. So you think if you had more of a normal childhood where you weren't as bullied or picked on or these things, where do you think you would be today? What would you be doing?
I'd probably be a successful lawyer.
Right.
I mean,
and that's what you did. You went to law school.
Right. And then I worked at a law firm. And, part of being in a law firm requires you to be part of the social group. Because otherwise working at a law firm really blows. It's a terrible job, especially the early years. And for me, it was like, well, I don't care about any of this stuff. I mean, I was the guy who, and so the authenticity has its upside and its downside. Right? When I was interviewing for law firm jobs, I was way too authentic for the interviewers, and it did not work well. I had the worst law school interview. I had the worst law firm interview record of anybody I've ever heard of at Harvard Law. I had 32 law firm interviews, and I got one offer. And I graduated cum laude from Harvard, and I'd written 3 books at the time, so my resume was pretty good.
You got one offer.
And I got one offer. But that's because I would be asked questions like, somebody would say, I remember one interview, they would say something like, well, why do you want to work in corporate law? Now look, we all know the answer, why you want to work in corporate law, right? You've got $200,000 of debt, or $150,000 of debt, and no one grows up thinking, you know what I really want to do with my life? I want to spend the next 4 years of my life directly out of law school reading for page numbers and for missing commas and indents. Which is what you do. You work 2,100, 2,200 billable hours at a major law firm. You're there from 8 in the morning to 9 at night reading for page numbers and paginations. And so they said, why do you want to work in corporate law? I said, for the money. And which is the true answer, but not the good answer, right?
Because I want to help people who are, wrongfully accused.
Right, but that's not even what you do at a corporate law firm, right? So you couldn't even say like, I want to be Atticus Finch or something. Instead, it's like, what do you want to do? What the answer they want is because I want the intellectual stimulation, and because I really like the back and forth, and I love the court system, and I really enjoy reading case law and all this stuff. And I was like, nah. cash. Like that's why you're here, aren't you? I mean, like, what are you doing here? You're making $2 million a year as a partner. You're gonna be doing this for $100,000 a year. I mean, and that was for me always an issue when it came to jobs. Was the money actually was, maybe this is because I grew up middle class, but middle class, not poor, not rich, very middle class, and so like my first home where I lived until I was 11 was probably an 1,100 square foot home in Burbank, where we had one bathroom for 6 people, and I shared a one bedroom with 3 of my sisters. Wow. So it was not poor, but like we were fine, but not loaded or anything. And so because of that, I was never really afraid of either living like that, and also because I grew up with a solid education, I wasn't afraid of like falling completely off the ladder completely, and because I'd made decent decisions, I wasn't really afraid of that. Listen, again, it's the biggest privilege you can have in American life is twofold. 2 biggest privileges in American life: being born here, having 2 parents at home. Those are the 2 biggest privileges, and I had both of those things. So I wasn't really that afraid of not earning tons of money or anything, and so I never had to be forced into a position of I need to take a job just for the money. Like I worked at a law firm for 10 months, and the money, the initial pay at law firm, this is not like private information because it's true for every major law firm as of like 2007 when I joined. The initial pay at these law firms was about $180,000 a year. And
it's a nice first salary.
Which is a great first salary. It's a lot of money.
Huge.
I mean, it's a great second salary. It's a great salary, right? $180,000 a year is a lot of money. And I worked there for 10 months, and I hated it. I mean, just despised it. And after 10 months, I walked in and I quit with no job lined up and a mortgage because I just bought a condo with my wife.
Here in LA, or was this?
Yeah, it was in LA. And I walked in and I quit, and I took a job a couple months later working for Talk Radio Network, which was a syndicator for Michael Savage and Laura Ingraham for less than a third of the pay. And that was just the way, because I didn't feel fulfilled. I hated it. I mean, I remember turning to she was then my fiance, I remember turning to her and saying, I hate this so much, I'm miserable. I mean, I'd lost weight, like I wasn't eating. And I said, I'm miserable,
I can't. Guy.
Yeah, exactly. I was down to like, I'm, like my normal weight is like 160, 165. I was down to like 138. So I turned to my wife and I'm like, I'm just miserable. And she said, well, then you should quit. And her parents were like, no, don't quit. Her parents were like, don't do it. Don't do it. You're making lots of money. And I was like, no, I quit. The funniest part of that is when I quit, I walked into the senior associate's office, and I'm Doug. And I said, I can't deal with this. This is just the worst. I need to quit. And he was trying to convince me not to do it. And he brought in another senior associate who had played minor league baseball. And this guy, was still young. I mean, he's a senior associate, but that means he's like 31, 32. And
you're 22.
At this point, I was 24. So 23. And so, 23. And 24. In any case, we all sat down, and Doug is trying to convince me not to quit. And then Andrew's trying to convince me not to quit. And I'm saying, like, guys, this is miserable. The hours suck. The work is boring. All the people here are jerks.
You're being authentic, yeah.
Right. And about 5 minutes into the conversation, Andrew turns to Doug, and he says, you know what, maybe I should quit. And he was dead serious. He was Andrew was the other senior associate. Wow. He turned to the other. He's like, maybe I'll go back to playing ball, man. I hate this. And so it turned from them trying to stop me from quitting into one guy trying to stop 2 guys. So I guess I was convincing it that he didn't end up quitting. I think he had a mortgage too. But then I walked in, and I mean, the punchline to the story is I walked into the boss's office, the guy who ran the branch, and I said, I'm quitting. And he said, you'll never make as much money as this again. You're blowing it. You're never going to make anything like this money again. I said, well, then I guess I'll never make this kind of money again. I've wanted him to send my tax return. I've wanted to send him my tax returns for so long now. But
that's the bullied kid in us that wants to prove people wrong, right? It's like I always did that too. For all of my 20s, people said I wasn't going to make it as a pro athlete. They said I wasn't going to make money when I was broke on my sister's couch, all these things. And now
success is great revenge. It really is.
It's the emails I get, the messages I get on Facebook from people from like back in the past. I'm like, this is just so funny to me. It's so funny, but it's all good. I used to be so motivated to prove people wrong, and it worked. I would achieve everything by proving people wrong and prove them wrong. And then I realized, like, wow, this doesn't actually bring me fulfillment or happiness.
Right.
It wasn't until when I hit 30 when I started to shift it all and say, you know what, I'm just going to start lifting people up and like serving people and not focusing on the 5 bullies in high school or middle school or the person who did this and that.
Right.
And focus on like now and
No,
here.
that's exactly right. I mean, you've seen Back to the Future 3. Remember, there's the
Yes.
train in Back to the Future 3 where they keep throwing in these kind of incendiaries into the train and it changes the color of the smoke coming out. But it gives a boost to like a higher speed each time.
Yes,
So anger can be that boost, but it can't be the actual baseline fuel that you're using to run the train.
Yes,
So
exactly.
it gives you that temporary high and it's like, okay, I'm going to go out and do something today.
Yeah.
But what actually makes you go do the work on an increasing level over an amount of time is the actual purpose and meaning.
Exactly.
If a good piece of advice is given to you, do you ignore the advice? Do you fight against reality? Are you more angry at reality than you are willing to change yourself? Because if that's the case, you're doomed to lead a pretty miserable life because reality is not changing. Now, that doesn't mean there are certain social circumstances that we can't all work together to change.